Hello, everyone. All right, I can officially kick off today's event. We're so thrilled to be joined by one of our wonderful partners today, who will really be the main star of today's Taproot webinar. So we're featuring our friends at TrustLaw, which is a wonderful program of the Thomson Reuters Foundation. And you'll hear much, much more about their incredible legal pro bono work throughout today's presentation. Um, I am Kimberly Swartz. I'm Taproot's Senior Director of Pro Bono Services. I lead up our Taproot Plus program, which I recognize some names on the call. So I know that we have some active Taproot Plus users, nonprofits on the line, which is wonderful. I'm so happy to see you. Um, and, you know, Taproot, we focus on the non-legal space. How can we connect your organizations with accounting or marketing or HR volunteers? And we know we can't do it all, right? There's this ethic of pro bono is so well established in spaces beyond what Taproot focuses on. And we want to make sure that we can provide our organizations with the best possible resources and referrals. And we found TrustLaw to be a really powerful resource in the legal space. So thrilled to introduce you all to their resources today. A few logistics notes. This is a Zoom room, so everyone will have the opportunity to come off mute and ask our presenter questions. We have Q&A set up at the end of today's agenda. But if you have questions throughout the event, plug that into that chat box. And Olivia will be trying to answer questions as she goes, or we can pose them to her at the end of the event during that Q&A time. But we ask that you just keep yourself muted while the presentation segment is ongoing. We are recording this event, so if you do end up needing to jump off the line early, no worries. We're recording it. We'll get it posted to our website as soon as possible, and you can just fast forward right to the spot where you ended up needing to jump off the call for. So that recording and some other resources from TrustLaw will be coming shortly. All right, Livia, I think that's my rundown. So if you're ready to jump in, I would love to pass the microphone over to you to get us started.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you so much to you and to the entire Taproot team for hosting us. We have a very long-standing partnership between Taproot and TrustLaw, and we're always really thrilled when we can connect with all of the nonprofit organizations that are a part of the Taproot network. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Livia Fry. I am a program officer with TrustLaw based in New York. However, our team is global, so if you are based in one of Taproot's jurisdictions outside of the US, we can offer you legal support as well, and I will get into that in just a moment. Without any further delay, I will go ahead and start chatting to you a bit about TrustLaw and what we can help you with. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so you can see a PowerPoint presentation. I will warn you as I'm pulling it up, I have not put it into slideshow mode yet, just because for some reason when I do that, I stop being able to see Zoom, so I will just ask you to bear with me for one moment as I get started. And Kimberly, can you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Wonderful. So I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of the Thomson Reuters Foundation and TrustLaw, and then we'll follow up with something called a legal health check, which I'll chat to you a little bit more about as we go through. So this is just a quick agenda for today. Again, the first part will be an introduction, and then we'll talk you through something called a legal health check, which is a tool that TrustLaw has developed in concert with several of our leading legal partners to kind of help you issue spot and anticipate legal issues before they become emergencies. It'll also give you a really good idea of the types of legal issues TrustLaw is well placed to help you with. Then, of course, I'll talk you through how you go about accessing that pro bono support via TrustLaw, and as Kimberly mentioned, we will hold space for a Q&A at the end. But if you would like to pop questions in the chat as I'm going, just so as to not forget them, Kimberly will be kind enough to flag them for me, and I'll do my best to answer as I go. So a little bit about the foundation at large. We are the charitable foundation of Thomson Reuters, the corporation. We are registered as a 501(c)(3) philanthropic foundation in the United States, and we are an independent charity registered in England, but our team is truly global with offices in Europe, Asia, Africa, North America, South America, every continent except Antarctica. And we really do our best to leverage the expertise and resources of Thomson Reuters to support organizations like yourselves that are driving positive social and environmental change. So these are some of the different focus areas of the foundation, just to give you a
Great.
general idea of the full scope of
Monitor.
work. We do focus quite a lot on media as we do have specialized expertise as a foundation in that area. So there are reporters that work for the foundation who cover underreported stories or underreported angles of stories that are getting coverage, maybe just from one side or the other. We also have Trust Conference, which is a flagship event that brings together people from the nonprofit sector, the business sector, philanthropic foundations, the government, different government sectors to kind of share best practices, learnings, and ideas on some of the most pressing global challenges at the moment. We also focus heavily on media development, supporting the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism at Oxford University in England. And there are programs that are available specifically to journalists and media organizations for mentorship and capacity building. But the bulk of what we're going to focus on today is TrustLaw, which is not media specific and which does have legal pro bono expertise that can help a wide range of nonprofit organizations, ranging from direct services to advocacy, anything you can really imagine topic-wise. And that's what we're going to focus on today. So about TrustLaw, we're just another program of the foundation. We are basically a philanthropic giving program. The only difference between us and a traditional program would be that instead of providing in the form of grants, we provide in-kind support in the form of access to pro bono legal counsel. Lawyers that work for our member law firms and member in-house counsel teams can volunteer to work on projects that interest them, and nonprofits, NGOs, social enterprises such as all of you can access free legal support. We offer access to, and we'll talk about what each of these points mean, but like it says here, just standard legal advice and assistance, as well as more in-depth legal research. And we also do produce our own tools and resources such as Know Your Rights guides that can help nonprofit organizations and or the communities you serve better navigate the legal and regulatory environment that you're working and living in. I will just say at the outset, because we are a philanthropic giving program, TrustLaw is completely free to join, free to use. There are very, very minimal membership requirements. Essentially, once you join, unless your mission or your structure drastically changes, your membership lasts as long as you would like it to, and you can use us as often or as little as makes sense for you. We're just kind of here to be another tool in the tool belt to help you and hopefully reduce the burden on you of governing and administering an organization from a legal perspective. This is just a little bit about our impact to give you an idea of our reach. Like I said, we are a global team. So while we do have a particularly robust legal network in the United States, we also have legal networks on every continent except Antarctica. And we have facilitated at this point, more than 10,000 connections between nonprofits and social enterprises and pro bono counsel across, again, every continent except Antarctica. We work across 199 jurisdictions. So we should be able to match you with pro bono counsel pretty much regardless of where you are. So I was talking a little bit before about kind of the different categories of legal support we can offer you. And the first is legal advice, which is where we see the greatest need. About 80% of the requests we receive are for just your kind of standard legal advice, which is what most people would think of attorneys doing on a daily basis. It's a lot of contract drafting or review, drafting template contracts and vendor agreements, help with real estate agreements, anything of that, volunteer agreements, liability waivers, anything that would fall under that bucket. is something that falls squarely with our parameters. Also, employment law. If you have questions about HR law, your obligations as an employer, you have an employee handbook that you would like reviewed. These are just some examples of things that would fall under that category. Also, a lot of data privacy and protection questions, website terms and conditions, a lot of questions around intellectual property protection and licensing all fall under that bucket of legal advice that TrustLaw can assist you with. And we'll go more in depth when we're doing our legal health check portion of the presentation. And then that remaining 20% of requests fall under legal research, which is essentially when you as an organization have a more in-depth legal question or a more in-depth set of legal questions about the legal or regulatory environment that you're working in or that your beneficiaries are living in. For example, I'll give you more examples later on, but for example, voter ID laws in a specific state might be an example of a legal research project that you'd like to produce a resource on. And in that case, we would match you with the legal team or set of legal teams, and you would work with them to really define what resource would make the most sense. Maybe it's a strategy memo, maybe it's a know your rights guide. You would refine those really detailed legal questions, and then they would be able to put together a more in-depth resource for you that you can either use to inform your own internal work and strategy, or you can use to help the beneficiaries of your organization better navigate any legal complexities that they might be facing. So there are some legal issues that we unfortunately are not very well placed to offer support for, and we do just like to be very transparent about those at the outset. So I'll talk you through them right now, and again, happy to answer any questions. So this first one, when we say advocacy on behalf of organizations or individuals, it really ties into this third bullet point around litigation. And what we mean is, for example, if God forbid you found yourself party to a lawsuit and wanted legal advice, we could theoretically match you with counsel to advise you of your general rights and responsibilities, but we would not be able to match you with counsel to represent you in court, write letters on your behalf, file appeals, or anything of that nature. That's something you would need to retain outside counsel for. So that's what we mean when we say we can't help with advocacy or litigation. We also, this kind of ties in as well, are not particularly well placed to help with urgent requests. And I think that you'll find that's pretty much true across the legal pro bono ecosystem, because lawyers take these projects on a volunteer basis. We cannot guarantee that we would be able to match you quickly. It does take a minimum of 1 month. So that's another reason why we have that legal health check tool to help you identify issues before they become urgent, because we are much better placed as a service to help with more mid to long-term issues to help shore up and ensure your resilience and sustainability as opposed to helping in an emergency situation. Translations of documents, if you have documents that need to be looked at by a legal team that's based in a different jurisdiction where the lingua franca might be different, they may be able to provide translation if they happen to have somebody on hand who speaks both languages, but if not, you would need to retain an outside translator before the legal team would be able to work with those documents. Administrative or tax issues. Now, if you have questions around maintaining your 501c3 status, what your legal responsibilities are to maintain a tax-exempt status, anything like that, we absolutely can match you with counsel to answer those questions. What we mean here is we just can't match you with somebody to help with filing taxes because that falls more under the realm of a CPA. However, Taproot is a wonderful resource for non-legal pro bono, so I would encourage you to look to them for that. And then when we say visa applications or anything related to immigration, again, we just can't help with actually filing immigration requests on behalf of an individual, even if they are an employee of the organization. But if you have general questions around your rights and responsibilities as an employer, if you choose to sponsor somebody for a work visa, for instance, we can match you with counsel to help answer those general questions. And then finally, requests on behalf of a third party. The way our model is set up is any request for pro bono support does have to come from somebody who is a member of the TrustLaw network, and we'll talk through how to join more towards the end. But if you have a peer organization who would like to avail themselves of pro bono support, you wouldn't be able to submit a request for them. However, we love referrals. You are always welcome to give them my contact. Talk them through how they can go about getting access to TrustLaw. So please don't be shy to do that. The good news is that's the only sad slide. Anything else, legal pro bono wise, should fall squarely within trust law parameters. So we will move on and talk a little bit more in depth about that.
Livia, I want to jump in with a specific question that came in already, and
Mhm.
flagging because this is a common one that Taproot gets from our nonprofit network.
Mhm.
NDAs, is that something that
Yes,
folks can turn to your organization for?
absolutely. That would fall squarely under the contract realm. So non-disclosure agreements, absolutely. Please feel free to submit. And
Perfect,
great
thank
question.
you.
Thank you so much. So we'll jump into me going through the legal health check a bit now, and I've also provided Taproot with a copy of our more in-depth checklist. So you should be receiving a copy of that as a follow-up material. And again, you're welcome to share that with any other organizations you'd like. And we definitely encourage you to keep it on hand and go through it to just try to issue spot and make sure that you're all shored up and um, all of your legal ducks are in a row. So the first area that this exercise covers is structuring and governance. And some examples of the questions we would encourage you to ask are listed on the screen. So for example, you may have started out with a particular legal structure, say as a public charity, but it might be that your mission has significantly changed and it might make sense for you to restructure. So does your current structure match your current operations and activities? Does it make sense that you're a registered 501(c)(3) when you should be, for instance, a B Corp? Would be a question that we would encourage you to look at under that area. Related to that, are your governing documents up to date? Have you had a look at your articles of incorporation recently? Have you had a look at your bylaws recently? Do they still accurately reflect the roles and responsibilities of your executive leadership and of your board? Does it still accurately reflect your mission and your programming? And if not, do you need to, have an attorney look at that and help you update it? Do your articles of association or incorporation include provisions to protect your social mission, which is particularly important at this time when we see that nonprofits are, really facing a very hostile environment? Making sure that your social mission is very clearly outlined in your governing documents can be a very good way to ensure that you're protected and you're protecting your 501(c)(3) status. And again, you just want to make sure that the roles and responsibilities of your leadership are clearly defined and that everybody is legally protected should there, heaven forbid, be any type of dispute. So these are all things we would encourage you to think through. And if you have any doubts or any questions about any of them, these would be really good areas to connect with pro bono counsel on. So moving more into HR, looking at staff and recruitment, as I mentioned before, do you have a staff or employee handbook? If not, are you interested in drafting one? And if so, when is the last time, if ever, you had it reviewed by counsel? If it's been a while or if it's never been reviewed, it is beneficial to have an expert in employment law take a look to make sure that you are completely covered and that your employees are also, being protected and provided for as is appropriate or called for in your particular legal jurisdiction. Do you have template agreements for new employees, for consultants, for volunteers, for interns? If not, does it make sense for you to have templates so that you don't have to draft a new agreement every time? Non-disclosure agreements would also fall under this. An attorney can help you with drafting template agreements. They can review any existing templates that you have. Alternatively, if you are looking to draft a bespoke contract, maybe for a particularly large project, they can help you with that as well. And they can also help with, well, yes, that would be kind of, that would be the full scope under employment law. And related to the staff handbook, have your HR policies been reviewed lately, and are you certain that they're in compliance with state and federal employment laws? If not, especially again during this current time, this is a very easy way to protect your 501(c)(3) status by making sure you're in compliance with these things. So definitely good to connect with counsel on if you've not had your policies reviewed ever or recently.
Thanks, Livia. This has already been super helpful. I just, if we don't mind just going back, because I want to touch on the volunteer agreements bullet, because again, this is another frequently asked
Mhm.
question that we get from Taproot's audience. And most of the time, the question is in context around like, as you enter into a Taproot partnership with one of
Mhm.
Taproot's volunteers, can your organization, can your nonprofit also have the volunteer sign your own volunteer agreement? And our answer is always yes. Have them sign an NDA or volunteer agreement if that's something that you want to layer on top of the terms and conditions Taproot already has in place to protect you. And then the follow-up question is, oh, can you help us create that volunteer agreement? And our answer is unfortunately no, right? Because that's beyond the scope of what
Mhm.
Taproot can provide. So again, just want to highlight that as a really good way that trust law support can kind of work in tandem with the work that you're already doing over here on the Taproot side.
Absolutely. And fortunately, that is something we are very well placed to help with. We do get a lot of requests specifically for contracts, including employment contracts and volunteer agreements. So please do feel free to come to us, and we would be more than happy to connect you with counsel on that type of request. That makes a lot of sense. So more broadly on contracts and policies, moving out of the employment law space exclusively, um, do you have general contract templates? Do you need funding agreements reviewed? Do you have, are you renting office space and need a real estate attorney to review your lease agreement before signing? Do you have template vendor agreements in place for any vendors that you regularly use for events, or just if you have, for example, an IT contractor? And if you don't have those template agreements, does it make sense for you to have them on hand? And if so, would you like an attorney to help draft them? Generally, it is this is not legal advice. This is just generally a comment. Many organizations do find it easier to keep template agreements on hand that they can then just be tweaked if necessary. But again, also if you wanted help reviewing a bespoke contract or drafting a bespoke contract, and you can wait that minimum 1 month connection time period, that's definitely something we can assist with. Reviewing pending contracts or drafting template agreements or new agreements. So moving on to tax and finance, again, have you entered into any funding agreements, and have you had those reviewed by attorneys to make sure that you're meeting all of your requirements to maintain your 501(c)(3) status? Are you meeting all of your reporting requirements under those agreements? And are you just protected from any liability while working under the scope of that agreement? Are you in compliance with relevant fundraising regulations in any jurisdiction that you fundraise in? Because they can vary by state. So that's definitely something that you want to take a look at, and something that can definitely be reviewed if your 501(c)(3) status is being looked at. We do get quite a lot of questions around intellectual property and around data protection and data privacy. We tend to see those questions, especially in the United States and in Europe, but it's definitely a good idea for liability purposes for any nonprofit organization to be looking very closely at protecting any IP they have, and looking very closely at their data privacy and protection policies. So for instance, are your website terms and conditions up to date? And if not, would you like to connect with counsel to help drafting new ones? To help in drafting new ones? Are your policies, first of all, in compliance with relevant laws? And if not, how do you bring them up to compliance? Do you, on the IP side of things, have any ideas or pieces of work? It could be something as simple as your logo or your branded materials that you'd like to protect. Do you produce anything that you sell in order to reinvest those funds into your social mission? And if so, are they protected by licensing or by a patent? And what is the most appropriate form of intellectual property protection? And how do you go about filing for it and obtaining it? We have had organizations in the past come to us with IP questions in which they had a piece of intellectual property that they did not have, that either was not protected or was not fully their rights to it were not fully outlined in a contract when they obtained it from, say, an artist who designed it, and it did lead to legal problems down the road for them. So we would encourage you to look at making sure that not only are any original works protected, but if you're collaborating with anybody and they agree to allow you to utilize this piece of intellectual property, do you have a formal agreement in place with that artist or that vendor to ensure that they can't just, pull it at any given time and then you're without it and it's something you need to support your mission and support your work. So taking a breath and pivoting from legal advice, I'll talk to you a bit more about legal research projects, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about some specific examples. But just an overview of why organizations do legal research when they come to trust law. If you carry out any advocacy activities, and you are looking at advocacy around, for example, pending legislation or existing legislation, and you would like to have a better understanding of what impact those laws would have if passed or are having, that you can then use in your advocacy, you can connect with legal teams in each relevant jurisdiction to produce either an internal strategy memo that can inform your strategy and your work, or an external memo that you can bring to local, state, national, or international bodies and use as part of an advocacy campaign. Alternatively, do you have questions about the regulatory environment in which you're working? For example, is there pending legislation in your state or in your city or at the federal level that you think is going to impact your work and you'd like to get a better understanding of how? We can connect you with legal teams to help you try to forecast that, or if a law has been passed and you think that there's a current law in place that you maybe weren't aware of or is new that is impacting your mission, you can connect with counsel to dive deep into those questions and again, produce an internal resource that can inform your work. We also do support organizations that are doing direct services that want to produce more of a know your rights guide style resource for the people that they serve, and that would fall under the area of legal research as well. And I'm gonna just switch and give some examples here. So, and these are all public, so we do have permission from the organizations to share these with you. If you prefer that a resource be kept private, we of course would not share it publicly. But some examples of external facing legal research projects. We partnered with one of our member organizations to produce a 50-state Know Your Voting Rights guide for people who are experiencing homelessness. So we were able to connect this specific nonprofit with a set of legal teams who were able to look at voting rights laws surrounding specifically whether you need an ID or a permanent residential address to vote, and what recourse people experiencing homelessness have who would like to vote, who are registered to vote, but for whatever reason are being denied at a polling place. They were able to produce this guide and disseminate it to their entire network across all 50 states, and it was able to better equip people experiencing homelessness to be able to register, to be able to go to the polls, and to deal with any pushback that they might be getting that is not in line with actual law. So that's an example of a Know Your Rights guide for kind of an external community that you might serve. Alternatively, or not alternatively, but another example is we worked with another organization who is a partner of ours called Disability IN to produce a really comprehensive memo on disability inclusion laws throughout the European Union. And they were able to take this work and make it part of a larger advocacy campaign at the national level across certain countries and at the European Union level writ large to advocate for more robust disability inclusion laws in business. So that would be an example of how a legal research project was used to support an advocacy campaign. And again, these are both public resources. We also do from time to time partner with our legal members to produce our own set of resources that we then will circulate to our community, in which you are welcome to use for yourselves and or pass along to anybody else. So one example is we worked with a couple of our law firms to produce a guide on navigating intellectual property laws in the United States. And while it doesn't substitute for legal counsel, it does provide a broader overview of intellectual property laws to kind of of help you out if you have a more general set of questions and don't have time to wait to connect with counsel, or just don't think connecting with counsel is necessary after you've read through this guide. Another example is a guide to which legal structure is most appropriate for social entrepreneurs. It might not be that a 501c3 is most appropriate for every social entrepreneur. So this is a guide to help anybody interested in forming an organization or maybe restructuring an organization decide on which option is best for them.
And Olivia, actually, we have a personal example of one of those
Okay.
types of projects because we at Taproot actually worked with a law firm that we were connected with through TrustLaw to develop a resource which actually applies to one of the questions that we received in the chat recently. So I'm plugging that link in. But it's a toolkit detailing the legal steps to forming a 501c3 organization. So it was this resource that, even though we know that's not an action Taproot can assist every single social startup with, we wanted to create a resource, and TrustLaw was able to connect us with a law firm in order to do the research and then actually shape the content for it.
Yeah, and that's a great example. I remember that guide, and I'm glad we were able to help with that. Well, able to help you connect with a law firm for that. So I've talked a lot at you about what we can and can't help with, mostly what we can help with. I'll talk to you a little bit now about how you actually go about accessing pro bono support via TrustLaw. So again, our membership is free. Nobody will at any point ask you for any money. And we like to think that applying is a short and painless process. The first thing you would do is kind of just, and we'll follow up via email with links to do this. But there's a short online application. It'll ask you for things such as your EIN number, your articles of incorporation, a brief description of your programming and any impact metrics you can share, just basic information such as that. And there will also be a space for you to note how you learned about TrustLaw. And if you just make sure to go ahead and note that you learned about us through Taproot, we can go ahead and kind of prioritize your application and cut the processing time down from a month to 1 or 2 weeks, depending on if we need to follow up for additional information or have any additional questions. Once you submit that application, it comes directly to me. I get a notification, I review it. I usually do end up having to get in touch with 1 or 2 follow-up questions. So don't panic if that happens. And generally, when we're doing that, it's to make sure we have certain information on hand that we can then kind of share with our law firms if and when they're taking on projects so that they can run their own internal conflict of interest check processes. So just a little bit about our eligibility criteria. An organization does need to be officially registered or incorporated for a minimum of 12 months prior to being onboarded to TrustLaw. An organization also has to, of course, be non-discriminatory. I'm not worried about that. When we say apolitical, we just mean it can be a government agency, the arm of a political party, a UN agency, or anything like that. If you receive government funding or government grants, that's of course totally fine and doesn't impact your eligibility. And non-proselytizing. So just can't be exclusive to one faith, can't promote one faith to the exclusion of others, can't denigrate a specific faith. But if you are faith-based, just in the sense that you're motivated to do positive social work because of your faith, that is totally welcome. It's absolutely encouraged, and we have a number of faith-based organizations in our network. And you would need to, of course, and I'm sure all of you be working toward a mission that seeks to drive positive social, humanitarian, or environmental change. And you need to just be able to clearly express that mission and be able to clearly kind of articulate your programming and any impact that you've had thus far. We do ask that you be able to share one annual report or comparable material, such as a pitch deck or maybe a detailed brochure, something of that nature. And if you are, and I don't think anybody here is, but if you are a for-profit social enterprise, we also ask that you have a public commitment, either in that annual report or on your website or somewhere public, to reinvesting a minimum of 51% of your profits back into your social mission. We also, and this is a requirement for 501c3s anyway, ask that you have a board in place that has at least one independent member, meaning that they are not otherwise employed by the organization or related to somebody who is employed by the organization. And then there's this piece around financial sustainability, and that requirement really comes from our law firms. We find that they are reluctant to take on projects if an organization demonstrates significant financial instability. So we just ask that you be able to demonstrate that you have enough funding on hand to continue operating for the short term, essentially 12 months from the date of your application. And if you have any questions or concerns about that, I'm happy to talk through them with you. So once you've applied and been accepted and been onboarded, you will get an email from me as well as an automated email from our system prompting you to log into our online member portal for the first time and set up a permanent password. You'll also be able to add as many colleagues from your organization as you would like to your account on this portal. And this is kind of going to be your main interface with TrustLaw. So this is how you're going to submit requests for support. That's primarily what you're going to use it for, although you can also access different resources like some of those guides we talked about and see any upcoming events that we're planning for our network. You'll be able to see them there as well. But as an example, if you're submitting a request, you'll log into that portal. You'll go to the My Projects tab at the top. You'll see a big button that says New Request at the top of that My Projects page. You'll just need to submit a few sentences if you like a short paragraph, but it doesn't have to be very detailed, describing your legal need and what jurisdiction or jurisdictions the attorney should have expertise and be licensed in. You'll click submit and you'll be prompted to book what we call a scoping call with an attorney who is on TrustLaw's staff, who will speak with you for about 30 minutes to make sure we understand all of the details of your legal need. From there, they will put all of that information into kind of a standardized, what we call a scoping form, which is just a more easily digestible format for our legal members, but you'll have final approval over that text before we send it to anybody. Once you've approved that, we do a couple of things. We put your project in the side of our portal that faces only our legal members, so it would only be visible to our law firms and in-house counsel teams who have also gone through a vetting and application process. And of course, it will be visible to TrustLaw staff. This is just so if anybody happens to be proactively searching for a matter that such as yours, they'll find it. But we also do proactive outreach to firms in our network that we think would be a good fit for you based on expertise and jurisdiction, so that we can make sure we're finding you the best possible match. We will send any offers we receive to you, and you will be the one who ultimately picks what you work with. That's not something we're going to choose for you because you know what you need better than we do. And then once you accept an offer, we send an email connecting you with the firm. And from there, for legal advice projects, we do take a step back because you know what you need better than we do. And we, again, don't want to be prescriptive. So from there, we'll take a step back. We will get in touch periodically to get your feedback and make sure that everything is going well. And you're always welcome to reach out to us if you need anything, if you need troubleshooting with anything. For legal research, depending on the size of the project, for some larger legal research projects, we will stay a little more involved, just in that we'll play a project management role. If there's multiple firms involved, it can become very arduous to kind of wrangle all of them, so we'll do that for you. If it's a smaller project with only one firm, not so much, because that project management isn't so burdensome. But we're never going to determine the deliverable for you or determine anything substantive about the engagement. That is all up to you to drive that relationship. So here's my contact information, but again, my lovely colleagues at Taproot have agreed to send some follow-up materials your way afterwards, so you would be getting this via email as well. Please feel free to always reach out to us with any questions, concerns, follow-ups. Always happy to talk. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat, but happy to take any questions or talk through anything that would be helpful.
Olivia, that was great. And I have to say, you already knocked out a fair amount of the questions just through that super thorough walkthrough of the sign-up process and then also the eligibility requirements as well, many of which are similar to Taproot Plus's own eligibility requirements. so shouldn't be unfamiliar to some of these organizations on the line. I'm just scanning a list of some outstanding questions. We had a few that were on specific types of contracts. Do you draft partnership MOUs and data sharing agreements?
Yes, MOUs, partnership agreements, vendor agreements, real estate contracts, NDAs. Let's just go ahead and I'm pretty think it's pretty safe to say that any type of contract, provided it's not very time sensitive, as I mentioned, does fall
Right.
under trust loss parameters.
Yeah, and I would note that Taproot has some golden rules for pro bono that I would think also extend when you're thinking
Hmm.
legal pro bono as well. And urgency is one of the tests that
Hmm.
we talk about with our nonprofits. And so I think, again, hopefully that's a lesson that's translating from one program to another here. Um, Another question that came in was around someone who is just starting a nonprofit.
Hmm.
So they're working on gaining their 501(c)(3) status,
Hmm.
and asked specifically, is TrustLaw a resource for assisting with the 1023 application and filing process?
So unfortunately, I don't think so because again, you do have to be officially registered or incorporated in some form in order to be eligible for trust law, and that does have to be for a minimum of 12 months. So we're not particularly useful during that startup phase. If you were restructuring and switching, for instance, from a for-profit social enterprise to a 501(c)(3), that is something we could help with, right? Because you have been officially registered. But we're not really set up to help with that initial incorporation.
Right. Um, and again, I'm just going to drop a link to a resource that Taproot put together again in partnership with a legal team that TrustLaw connected with us. That walks through that process a bit more. So
Mhm.
even though neither of our organizations are able to support, if you don't yet have that status as a legal entity, we do have this resource available. I would also shout out the National Council of Nonprofits has a fantastic resource library just for individuals seeking to gain their 501(c)(3) status. So would shout them out as well. Um,
I echo that. They're a partner of Trust Laws as well, and they're a fantastic resource for nonprofits. And there are also
Absolutely.
state-specific organizations that fall under their umbrella. So, for instance, New York nonprofit, if you're in New York, Cal nonprofit, if you're in California, for example. So I would encourage you to have a look at the national organization and also the state-specific ones.
Yeah. Going beyond just the US with this next question, to what extent is Trust Law able to assist with the legal aspects of an international nonprofit merger? So in this case, it's a US nonprofit looking to potentially merge with a UK-based nonprofit.
Mhm. I would have to see the specific project request in order to fully answer that question, but just from a general standpoint, I can tell you that we do have as I mentioned, a robust legal network in the United States. We also have a very broad legal network in the UK and in England specifically. So I don't foresee a problem based on that description in matching you with pro bono counsel. I just don't want to say 100% until I've seen the details of the request.
Totally understandable. Um, This next question came in related to what you were sharing around IP, intellectual property.
Hmm.
Someone posed a question, if the organization has an original idea, should they wait to speak to someone at TrustLaw before launching that idea or the resource or whatever the piece of content may be? Um, or how much estimated time should they allow before seeking out some sort of copyright, IP protection, etc.?
So the second part of that question does sound more like legal advice. I really wouldn't be able to answer that for you. That's something you would have to connect with an IP attorney on. In terms of how long you should wait before contacting Trust Law, if you do want to have those IP protections in place before you launch, I would definitely say the better. You want to allow as much lead time as possible, because it does take that minimum of 1 month to connect with counsel. And then, of course, you have to go through the process of beginning that attorney-client relationship and then working with counsel to actually work through whatever process it may be, that you need to get that patent or get that licensing agreement or whatever form of IP protection is appropriate. So I would just say as much lead time as possible. And I will just say that for any kind of request, as much lead time as possible, is really better.
Great. All right. I was running through a few other ones that came in on the registration form for the event as well.
Mhm.
Um, Liability waivers. I think that was
Mhm.
might have been covered in the contracting section, but it looks like you're already nodding, so we'll go ahead and say a quick yes to liability waivers.
Absolutely.
Yep. And then we just had a general question around employment law issues, which I believe was also pretty specifically answered earlier in the presentation as well. Um, and then we did have a couple questions come in around legal support pertaining to donated real estate, which is something that does, regularly come up from the Taproot nonprofit community. Unsure like how to even process donations
Mhm.
of that kind. Is that something that they would be able to turn to your network for?
Yeah, you would definitely be able to turn to our network for help in the legal aspects of defining that transaction, understanding, whatever implications it may have to your tax status, understanding, what kind of agreement you need to have in place. Those are all things that we can help with.
Right. Um, Great question submitted just now from Danielle around the documents that are actually required to demonstrate that 1 year of funding availability. So during the TrustLaw sign up process.
Mhm. So at the outset, I will say we don't have a minimum amount of funding you have to have. It's entirely individualized based on the type of work you do, the type of overhead you have. Some organizations can operate on very little money, and that's totally fine. It's not like you have to have a minimum of $100,000 in the bank, for example, to be able to access trust law. That would be insane. You just need to be able to show, for example, a grant agreement. Some people send in tax returns showing your balance at the end of the former fiscal year. Some people send, if you're comfortable, bank statements. We're not going to require a bank statement specifically, but some organizations do send them. Anything that can demonstrate that you've got a certain amount of padding just to be able to cover your overhead for 12 months. Um, Many organizations are facing funding challenges. I understand that everybody's in a lot of pain right now. I will tell you very bluntly that this requirement does not stem from us specifically. It stems from our legal partners. We have found historically that has been very difficult to match organizations with pro bono legal counsel without being able to demonstrate that minimum financial sustainability, because lawyers who are doing pro bono work want to ensure that the organization is going to have an impact somewhat into the future. And we don't want to onboard you to trust law and get your hopes up and then not be able to match you with pro bono counsel for that reason. I understand it's an incredibly harsh environment right now, and um, I personally wish we didn't have to have that requirement in place, but that is where it comes from.
And I would shout out something that Olivia touched on earlier, which was accounting support, bringing in a CPA. If you don't feel like you have financial documents or a full view of what your financial holdings or streams of revenue are going to look like for the next 12 months, that's something that you could turn to Taproot for, get support on the financial management systems, financial documentation. Therefore, you would be ready to go to TrustLaw and other potential resource providers similar to TrustLaw that are going to have requirements around budget or cash holdings, etc. So again, another way our programs can kind of work in conjunction with one another. And then, Anne, I see a question around presenting trust law, sharing trust law with an organization. I know referrals are definitely welcome. Olivia touched on that earlier. We also are making this recording accessible, so it's going to be added to YouTube and will be able to be easily shared with whoever could also benefit from this information. All right, I'm just checking the list of questions now, making sure that we were able to get to everything. If you feel like you have a question that hasn't been addressed yet, please pop it into the chat or, raise your virtual Zoom hand and we can go ahead and unmute you as well. All right, great. We have one around trademark registration.
I see. And yes, we can assist you with trademark registration.
And then looks like a question on financial eligibility, revenue, limit on revenue, for example.
I'm not sure I fully understand, but if you are, for example, a nonprofit that generates revenue for the purpose of reinvesting back into your social mission, no, we don't have a maximum on that because you're not making a personal profit, right? You're using that revenue to support your social mission. If you are a for-profit entity, which I don't know that anybody on this call is, but for example, if you are a social enterprise that is for profit but has a social mission, the only requirement would be that you publicly commit to reinvesting a minimum of 51% of those profits back into your social mission. However, there's no maximum on the amount of revenue you can generate in order to support that social mission. I hope that answered.
There are billion-dollar-a-year nonprofits out there, which is
Yeah.
wild to
It's
think about,
crazy.
but they do exist. All right. Any other questions that we can make sure we tackle today? Great. Well, this certainly isn't a speak now or forever hold your peace situation. We will follow up after this event as soon as we have the recording and the package of resources that Livia mentioned. The Taproot team will be following up with you all. Again, Taproot is committed to getting nonprofits the resources they need for free, whether it's through us or other great partners out in the field. So just would love to invite folks again to just say thank you to Livia and our friends at TrustLaw for offering to take this hour and share these resources with us. We're very appreciative of it.
And thank you, everybody who took the time to attend. And thank you again to Taproot for hosting us. We look forward to this every year. So just thank you so much. And thank you so much, Kimberly and Kristen, for all of the work you've done on coordinating today.
Kimberly, this is Sandra. I just added a comment, a question in the chat. Could you look at that and ask Livia to address it, please?
I can go ahead
Right.
and have a look.
Yeah, Sandra, is this the item around currently self-funded?
Yes.
I see. So if we are currently self-funded but applying for grants, would TrustLaw be able to assist? Yes, as long as you're able to demonstrate that you're financially sustainable for at least 12 months, it's okay if you're self-funded. We are agnostic about where it's coming from. I mean, within legal means, obviously, but I'm joking.
Thank you.
All
Absolutely.
right. Thanks so much for shouting that out in our closing minutes. Great to end on a good question, Sandra. So we appreciate it. All right, everyone. Well, we will talk to you later via email, and please keep in touch with any questions, whether they are in the legal realm or the non-legal realm. Both of our organizations are here to help. Have a great rest of your day.
Bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, folks.